Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Instagram Live at Building Movement Project. We're so glad that folks are joining us today. My name is Deepa Iyer, and I am the Director of Movement Building at the Building Movement Project, and I'm so excited that folks are joining us. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds while folks join, and I'd love to know, as you're joining us, where you're joining us from. So if you want to tell us in the comments where you're joining us from, what your location is, I would love to know that. If you are looking for the conversation with Greisa Martinez Rosas, you are in the right place. And I want to welcome everyone who is part of our Solidarity semester, which I will tell you about in just a second. And I want to also welcome folks who are not part of the Solidarity semester, but are just interested and excited to hear about this conversation. It's great to see folks. Hi, Tessa from Milwaukee. Hi, Jenna from Chicago. And Catherine from Queens. Sage from Santa Cruz. It's great to see you all here. Welcome to our Instagram Live. My name is Deepa Iyer, and today we'll be in conversation, or I'll be in conversation with you, with Greisa Martinez Rosas, who will be joining us shortly. See folks from Chicago, Cleveland, and yeah, I want to really, I want to say something about, I think somebody just wrote about the skies in Oregon, and just wanted to say that I know that all of us are in the midst of a lot of challenging moments right now. So whether that is the pandemic, whether it is the veil that has been lifted when it comes to systemic and structural racism in this country and anti-Black racism in particular, whether it is the wildfires on the West Coast or the evacuations that are happening on the Gulf Coast, there is a lot going on, and there's a lot that all of us are dealing with and processing. So however you join us, whatever place you're in, whether you are really mobilized and catalyzed, or whether you are feeling confused and overwhelmed, you're welcome in this space. We're glad to have you, and I hope that this conversation gives folks a way to reset, to anchor yourselves, and perhaps even feel rejuvenated and motivated for taking action for social change. So as folks are coming in, again, please let us know where you're joining us from. And as I mentioned, we will be in conversation with Greisa shortly. But let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing here and why we're gathering. So every Thursday from 6 to 7 Eastern, here at Building Movement Project's Instagram, we will be going live in conversation with movement leaders who are really on the front lines of many of the issues and movements that are happening in our country today. And tonight we're going to be talking with Greisa, but we're also going to be talking with a range of other people over the course of this month. So that is between September 17th today to October 15th. And this is part of a program that we're running right now called the Solidarity Semester. And I want to see if I can pull up the a picture. Hi, Greisa, welcome. We're going to get you in just a sec. A picture of our Solidarity Semester, which is what we're doing right now. Building Movement Project and Solidarity are running a free 5-week online series for youth aged 18 to 25. And honestly, anyone can join us to really learn about social change roles and to understand how we actually engage in solidarity in practice, and also how we take care of our communities and ourselves. You can see on this particular, you can see here that we series, and we are hoping to have you join. You can register at any point in time, and we would love to have you with us. And Grace is here, which I'm really excited about as well. So let me get her into the conversation as well. Hi, Graisa.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm so happy to see your face and to join this live.
I know. Well, thank you for joining us. And for folks who are coming in, we just put in the information on where you can actually register for the Solidarity semester. Anna from Solidarity has put that information up, and you can register here still. I'm going to pin this so that folks can see it, and you can register at any point in time for our conversations that are happening at the Solidarity semester every Tuesday on Zoom and every Thursday on Instagram Live with really wonderful folks like Greisa. So now that you're here, Greisa, let's just get started. I want to start by saying that you are honestly one of my most favorite people, and I think I make that clear to you every time I get to see you or be in space with you. Greisa is the new executive director of United We Dream, but she is not new to the immigrant rights movement. She is not new to movements for social change, and she's somebody that if you have the ability to meet her, and I have been honored to be in space with her, you'll know that she's not only a committed advocate, right, for movements for social change, but she's one of the most authentic people that you'll meet. Greisa wears her heart on her sleeve. And it's very clear from the minute she starts talking that she does that. So I'm so grateful that you're here. And I want to start out, Greisa, actually by asking you to share a little bit about your own trajectory to social change work. As you know, a lot of the folks who are part of the Solidarity semester are young folks who are trying to figure out their pathways to movement. Some of them are woke, all of like now awakened to moments, and some of them have been woke and awakened for a really long time because of the realities of their lives, right? So tell us a little bit about how you got started in doing social change work.
First off, Deepa, I have not enough words in the vocabulary that I possess to say how grateful I am for you, how badass you are as a woman, how I follow your leadership, and I've been in times where it's been like the most devastating moments, like you've been there, in times of triumph and joy, you've been there. So thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. Actually, part of the reason why I'm here is because of I know something that we share, which is the love for our families and the love for those that have sacrificed so that we could have an opportunity to show up today. And so, for me, I'm undocumented. I'm queer. I am someone that is really honored to be able to lead in this moment. And actually saying undocumented for a longest time, for like the majority of my life, was something that I would have never thought I would do. It was a place of deep shame for me. Like, I don't know about you, but like in my immigrant family, like all of it was about like, keep your head down, don't talk to anyone, like just do what you got to do, like don't worry about it. Don't waste too much time, And so like I was a senior in high school and still very much ashamed, still very much in the closet, in the shadows. And I happened to be watching like a Sunday news. My dad and I, he was a Baptist preacher. He and I had like this tradition of watching the Sunday news together. He had his little like cup of coffee, and like I would be sitting there next to him. And in the news, they were saying that they had passed here in Washington, D.C., anti-immigrant bill that would say that him and me and my mom and all of the undocumented people in our lives would be put or constituted as felons. And anyone that would help us, anyone in our church community would also be felons if they were found to help undocumented people. I know that you were like one of the people in the front line sort of fighting back those pieces. And for me, like it kind of, I don't know if you've ever, I don't know how to use this phrase sometimes in my immigrantness, but like, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Yes. There was something.
Well, it was really personal. It was really personal for you. It hit home.
Totally. And I also felt like it was like there was this thing in my belly that said like, this cannot be. Like I cannot in my own senses continue to do this. And so did you have MySpace? Did you have a MySpace?
I didn't.
You know?
I'm probably too old for that.
Well, okay, I did at that moment. I got on it with and found some friends that like had seen that young people in California were walking out in protest of what was happening here in DC. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why not here too? Like, I could do. And so for me, it was like, I still kind of remember it. I was chatting with my friend on AOL AIM, and I was saying like, hey, like let's come out, let's plan a walkout. And that next day we like had like these little flyers, like, hey, at 3 p.m. let's walk out.
Right. Yeah, you organized. You were organizing as a senior in high school.
I didn't even know that was what I was doing. I mean, I don't know. Happened to you, but it wasn't until later that like words like come to you, concepts that you're like, oh, like that's what I was doing.
Yeah. And I remember that, it was people like you, it was people like Eves, it was people like Jonathan, right, Jay Screen and others who were really at the forefront of saying, the immigrant rights movement has to actually pay attention to and be led by young folks who are undocumented and who are ready to organize, right, their communities, and who are ready to sit in legislative offices wearing their graduation gowns. And I think it was a source of great inspiration for a lot of folks. And is that also how United We Dream was born? Really out of young folks standing up, just like you, right, and others, to say, this is something that is important to us. It affects my life. It affects my family. And I'm going to do what it takes to I guess at some level, right, talk through the shame and talk about what my experiences are and come together with so many others. Is that how United We Dream really came about?
Absolutely. It's all about transformation. It's about not rejecting the shame, as you were saying, but actually like fully stepping into it, and actually when we do that, we transform it into power, into joy. That walkout that I was sharing with you about, it was the first time that I actually felt like if I would speak, people will hear me. And like such a it's like a simple thing, but it was such a moment where I felt like me, a young undocumented woman that had no other goals but to just like make it through and like not cause trouble, being able to just like raise her voice and call for people to take action. And that's what happens at United We Dream. That's immigrant youth movement. And we believe core that like those people closest to the pain, the people that know what it's like, how it feels in your bones when injustice is happening, we're also closest to the solutions, the innovations, the breakthroughs, which is part of like why, I really admire your work, because as a South Asian woman that is an organizer, that's a visionary, it's not work. You're not just like, when I know we're going to get to your map later, but I've been like sort of like nerding out about it, because you can tell that it's an organizer. It's someone that like really understands the ins and outs of the work, that like really ground that analysis. And for us, it's actually the thing that connects you and I is the through line that is also goes through the young people that took over the lunch counters in the South. It goes through young people that when they were in the Japanese internment camps here in the U.S., decided to say no in being able to be complicit in that work. Is like the young people that like said no, as like braceros from Mexico would come into the U.S. and would be bathed in these chemicals, and like Carmelita, who was a young woman that refused that for her. It's like we are part of that lineage and that through line. And part of what I do at United We Dream is ensuring that I'm creating the conditions for the line to move through me and into other people, because
I love that.
Longer term.
Yeah, I love that. And that's so perfect, because that's what we're also trying to do with this program, to really bring young folks in, right? And to let them know that there are ways that you can engage in social change work, right? Sometimes we are super overwhelmed. Sometimes we're really confused about what our roles are, what our skills are, and we don't know how to go. And especially now, I think, and over the last 4 years, I would say, there is so much that draws our attention. I mean, just 2020, right? The pandemic,
Yes.
the wildfires, the evacuations on the Gulf Coast, obviously the uprisings. There is a lot. And so I think for a lot of people, there's this sense of, well, where do I fit in? I mean, I care about these issues, but where do I fit in? What if I'm not a professional activist, right? What if I don't come from an affected community? Do I even have a role, right? And so that's really where, thanks for mentioning the ecosystem map, and I put it up, and that's really where that map comes in, because the framework is basically like, we all have a role to play, you know, and we're all part of an ecosystem. You can't do it alone. There are no silos in social movement work, right? We have to like come together, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but I want to know from you, like, do you see yourself on this map, or United We Dream? Like, where would you kind of say your roles are?
I mean, the beautiful thing about this, the visual, is also that I could see myself like moving through those spaces. So I think it depends on where you are in your life. There are times where I was like the rabble rouser, frontline organizer, like being in Dallas, Texas, organizing workers and moms, and like, you know, making sure that people had what they needed with their employers. And then there was the time where I was like a builder and building United We Dream in the last couple of years alongside Christina. I see myself as a storyteller, as someone that is able to share my experiences, my thing of transformation, and being able to use that story to be able to weave movements. Because, you know, I was actually sharing with someone that, you know, United We Dream is really proud to be in relationship and in solidarity with people across the movement. And we were, I was having a conversation with some of the leaders from the Movement for Black Lives, and they were sharing with me, sometimes for the first time, their own immigrant stories. And like to be a Black immigrant in the US, and like to see organizations like Undocu Black, led by Patrice Lawrence, and Gabby, that are really creating the conditions for young people to feel like the connections of all those things. And I see myself now as a weaver that uses storytelling to be able to bring about that belongs to all of us.
And I've seen you do that weaving work a lot. I think one of the real gifts that you have, Greisa, and you have many, is that you actually do figure out, and you can talk about the through lines. And I wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit about why that is so important. Because when we think about solidarity, right, which is, you know, we talked a little bit about our social change roles, and how they can't be siloed from each other. We're part of an ecosystem. And really figuring out the through lines of connections without equalizing or flattening connections, right? We're not all the same, but we have similar experiences of oppression because of white supremacy or colonialism or anti-Black racism or xenophobia or Islamophobia. And we also, I would argue, have similar histories of resilience, right? Why is it so important to build those connections right now? And can you also share some examples of how you all are doing that at United We Dream?
I love this question, Deepa. It's just like, as my mom would say, mi mero mole, like the thing that I'll say three things. The first one is that I lead an intersectional life. I am a queer woman. I am a Mexican immigrant. I grew up poor in this country, and in me, like the condition of, or the connection across those movements is personified. And like all of those pieces of me are unique and they're complex. And I also feel like it connects me to people outside of myself and outside of the movement that I've chosen to, you know, give myself to, which is the immigrant justice and racial justice movement. I think the second one is that it's just more joyful that way. To be able to not feel like you're like siloed, that you can share with people like stories that they're like, oh yeah, I felt like that too. Like, when I was sharing with Varshni, who leads the Sunrise Movement, about like what it was like to grow up as like the only non-white person in like rooms that you were like that you occupy, and like how clear or how weird and uncomfortable sometimes that feels, and all of us being able to say like, yeah, I know what that is. And I think that the third thing is that the systems that we are fighting are interconnected themselves.
Right.
When I think about our work, I think about this term that I actually just learned about, and to the point earlier that sometimes you're doing things that you don't really know what was happening. I in the last couple of years have committed myself to studying racial capitalism and how that actually brought me here to the US. Like, my parents were pushed into the US because of the NAFTA agreement that made my farmer family not be able to win enough money to be able to feed ourselves. All of that, being able to use our brown bodies and the Black bodies that have been laid to bear all across this country because of capitalism, because of profit, and putting people second to that. The systems that we're fighting for are interconnected, and so must our fight be, in order for it to be a fight that is actually poised to be able to win. So those are some of the ways where, again, I love this work.
Yeah. No, I hear that, the intersectional piece, like when you said, well, all of these sit inside me, so I can't be, just kind of one way, right? I walk into a room and I hold multiple identities and they affect me. But I just want to pull out what you said at the end, because I think that's really important. When you said the systems of oppression, right, are also intertwined. And so our fight must also be one that recognizes that and can't be in silos or in exclusion of others. And I will say that one of the ways in which I've noticed how United We Dream has stepped up in this way and really appreciated is with the fight against the Muslim ban, for example. United We Dream has always been very clear as one of the partners in the fight against the Muslim ban, and understanding that the Muslim ban is just another iteration, right, of the types of walls and raids and bans and exclusions and enforcement that are happening against all immigrants, brown and Black immigrants in this country. So I think that's been a clear example of solidarity, and it's not just faux or performative solidarity. Really appreciate Sanaa, who works at United We Dream, and how clear she is about the identities that she holds as, somebody who is undocumented, but also someone who is connected to the Muslim community and the South Asian community. And so I think that it does matter how we show up, right? And it does matter how we connect all of these different oppressions together as well.
Totally. No, I mean, thank you for saying that. I think that one of the biggest lessons for me has been that I think sometimes people applaud solidarity in big visible moments. So, as the uprisings were happening, we're still in the midst of the uprisings, but as it started, a lot of people were like, great work, UWD's being able to see this as a intersectional movement. But to be honest, the work started 8 years ago, when we were having one-on-ones with a lot of these folks that are leading this work, that were sharing meals when nobody was looking and Twitter wasn't activated, and to be able to know deep in my bones, not because of wokeness, not because it's the trend now, but because I know that if Black leadership and Black women's leadership is centered in the work, I have seen them work magic, and I know that I will ensure that I'm flanking them in every space that I'm in. And the same thing for people. I know that the work around the Muslim ban was important, but I know that United We Dream wouldn't exist without the activism of Muslim organizers after 9/11, really demanding for the abolishment of ICE and DHS as it was formed,
which
right?
was created after 9/11, which was created after 9/11, right? Yeah.
Some of our first deportation defense fights were for Kamal Saheb and his family that was taken away in the middle of the night because he was Muslim in the Muslim registry. So it's not only that it's the moral thing to do, it's actually the only way to do this work and do it well. And it's actually the most strategic way to do this work. So thank you for that. And I know that like, it happens in the small moments. It's not the big visible ones. Those are the first.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a long arc, and people don't see that solidarity is actually about relationships and relationship building and trust. And sometimes, you know, you're sitting together and you're having that generative conflict, right? Where you're not on the same page, but you're committed to sitting through it because you care about the people that you're sitting with and you care about moving through whatever conflict it is. But it is a long-term piece. I totally agree with that. One of the things that we say when we talk about solidarity through the solidarity semester is that there's some principles of transformative solidarity, and you mentioned several of them. One of them is centering, right? Centering the folks who are closest, as you said, folks closest to the pain are the ones who can figure out the solutions. And that's why centering is so important. But another one is the connections between people without equalizing them and saying they're all the same, but still finding, right, the through lines. And then another one that I wanted to kind of talk about, and before I do that, I also want to recognize that there are folks joining us from different parts of the country and maybe around the world. So let us know where you're joining from, but also feel free to comment with any questions that you might have as we talk about these principles of solidarity, from centering to connections to capacity, which is the next one we're going to talk about, and also United We Dream's work. So if you have questions for Greisa in terms of the work that she's done and United We Dream is doing, please feel free to put those into the comments. But I wanted to ask you this question because I think this is another part of solidarity, right? And the social change ecosystem map, which is our capacity to stay in this work. We are going through a time, I would say, hi Denver, Colorado, and Chicago. Thank you for letting us know where you are.
Chicago in the house.
Yeah. Boston, great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for continuing to join and put any questions that you have into the chat or into the comments. Be happy to take them. Hello for Southeast Michigan. Wonderful. So glad to have you. But as we think about sort of these moments that we're living through right now and the burnout and the fatigue, you know, we had our first Solidarity semester session just on Tuesday, and that was something that came up. You know, we did this poll and we asked folks, how are you doing in this moment, right? And folks said that I'm exhausted, I'm really fatigued, I'm burned out, I'm traumatized. Right? I'm really worried about the impact of this illness on my families. I am worried about the impact of anti-Black racism in my community and my family. So what is it that you are doing, right, as somebody who's leading an organization and someone who's really active in these movement spaces? How are you building your plan of sustainability? And what tips can you give us?
Well, first I want to give a shout out to the person that's joining us from Oak Cliff, which is my hood in Texas. Hey, Oak Cliff.
Yay, welcome.
I think that's part of where it builds all of my resilience thing. Like, you have to be tough to grow up in Oak Cliff. So, you know, I think, one, I just want to applaud for you even asking that question in that space. I think that, like, it's gonna have to take intentionality like that to be able to ask people how they are processing this moment, for all of us to have the commitment to center mental health and trauma and trauma-informed organizing into the work. You know, as someone that I lost my mom 2 years ago to cancer because corporations were not willing to give her a chance to live, or the medicine for her to survive. And as someone that lost my dad to deportation 13 years ago, part of my resilient practice in all of that has been to hold on to hope. And it's not like the rainbows and unicorns, like everything's gonna be okay, like sort of blind optimism. It's like this very centered commitment to the discipline of hope that tells me that I made it through all of those things, that there was always a thing after that to celebrate, a meal to share with my family, a pet that you love, which you'll probably see mine right there. You'll probably hear the thing.
That's awesome.
It's like being able to like find like the next thing to be hopeful for. And to be honest, you know, I'm really lucky and privileged to be able to have the support of having a therapist and having someone in my life that can hold that part of myself, and so many coaches and people that love on me, like you, like Christina, like Linda, who always checks in on me across the years. So I feel like it's community. I think the answer, and it's also like really being grounded in, it really is a discipline of like not feeling hopeless. And like really being able to ground ourselves in like in the joy that comes through the pain.
Yeah. And that's a lot, because, you know, you talked about some really hard times that you've been through, Greisa, right? And my heart goes out to you, as you know. But it would be natural to go through situations like that and just say, you know what, I really can't, right? I can't give to a movement. I can't give to a community because it is too hard. And I think and that's okay too, if folks feel like that's where they're at. But what I appreciated about what you said is how you looked at the next right thing, or the next step, right? What is next? What gives you hope? What builds community around you, and what makes you feel like you're part of a community? And that's where I think it's so important to not just think about our own self-care, but our community care and how we're looking out for each other. And so for those folks who are joining us, who are kind of coming into these spaces or coming into this work or nonprofit work, one of the things that is so important is to find your group of folks, right? And they don't always have to say you're amazing and be like yes people, right? They can be people who ask you hard questions, who make you think a little bit, right? Make you reflect a little bit. But it's so important to have that group, have that ecosystem, and really kind of, it doesn't all have to be movement people or people who are in this work either. I find that I get a lot out of connecting with people who maybe known me for a really long time, but actually don't do this work at all, right? But can kind of see through me and say, well, is this really how you want to show up? You know, and we'll ask me some of those hard questions too. But then we'll, and
good friends, Deepa.
Well, you know, I'm actually super lucky for that. And you're one of those people in my community. But I think it's also about identifying, right? Like if you're a frontline responder who's always kind of responding, that it's important to have some caregivers in your ecosystem who can say to you, you know what, maybe you don't have to show up at this rally or organize this event. Maybe you can take a step back for a little bit. So really thinking about building like a community of care, so that you don't, because some of us, I think we take everything on ourselves because we feel like it's so important. So, and someone here has said to you, thank you for your vulnerability and insight. And I really appreciate that too.
I can branch.
Yeah.
I can branch with you. I know how to ride a bike, so we might have to start there.
I don't either. Secret. So we have that in common.
Hey, we should form a movement of people that don't know how to ride bikes.
Exactly. Oh my God, that's so funny. I didn't know that. Maybe there are more of us. Yeah, we need to do that. That can be part of our community care once things get a little bit better, I guess. But we have a couple more minutes. So I want to ask folks, if you do have questions for Greisa, to feel free, or if you have thoughts about what this is stirring up in you. We've been talking about, you know, different ways in which folks show up, right, for solidarity practice. So centering folks who are affected, thinking about capacity for conflict, but also for care, both ourselves and our communities, thinking about making connections and building relationships that are oftentimes hard and sometimes messy, but are worth it, you know, sort of in the long run, if we stay with it and enter it with the best will that we can, right? Putting our best foot forward. So we've been talking about all of that. And of course, we've been talking about United We Dream. And Greisa, actually, you just started there, right? As the ED. I mean, you've obviously been there for quite some time, but you just started, what, a month ago, officially?
Yeah. This is month 1 of being the executive director. I could not have done it without our talks, but I have yet to tell you. But like, thank you so much for that. But yeah, I'm really honored to be able to lead. UWD is the nation's largest immigrant youth-led network. With at the end of this year, we're gonna have 1 million members, which I'm really excited about celebrating. So I think for us, it's about. I saw someone in the chat sort of say, like, what's your biggest accomplishment? And to be honest, I know I can be honest with myself and say that being able to love myself enough to embrace the transformation that happens at United We Dream Spaces, like where one can go, like me, from a place of being super ashamed to being unapologetic about being undocumented. Someone that was like so in the closet that I didn't even think to ask myself the question, and now I can say clearly and without any shame that I am queer. And the other piece that I wanted to add to what you were saying is that one of the biggest accomplishments that I'm still striving for is letting go of the idea that just if I work enough, if I work hard enough, then I will be enough. And folks, if you're because we're on Instagram, you should go follow Amber Abundance or Amber Phillips. She's like this beautiful Black woman storyteller that really like pushes me to like be able to learn parts of me. But she was sharing a story about how she sees her body as her home, as like her political home, like the place where she feels alive. And I think that like sometimes even in movement culture, I know we've talked about this a lot, there's this pressure to like overwork yourself, to be the wokest, to like have the sharpest analysis, to be afraid to ask questions. And I feel like the thing that I'm striving to now is like being like on my own side as like I'm on my side first. I advocate for me and what my heart needs and what my joy needs. So anyway, folks,
I love that. But that also takes a certain amount of self-awareness, right? I mean, you spend time with yourself. You're probing and you're thinking and you're reflecting. And that's another thing that, I want to get to this question, and I think it's related from E1 or Le.Berman, who says, what advice would you give to young folks who are unsure about what role to take on and how to get there? Part of that is self-awareness, right? Sitting with yourself and doing some of that deeper thinking, even and sitting with contradictions, because we all have a lot of contradictions, right? And we're absorbing a lot of, like you said, messages from our culture, from society, from family. And so how do we kind of move through some of that and get a little bit clearer in terms of hearing our voice? So I'm curious to know how you'd answer this question from about what advice would you give to young folks who are not entirely sure about what role it is that they want to take on?
Well, as you know, UWD is a youth organization, and so we actually part of the process about this that we go through is like really asking yourself, what is the thing that makes you feel alive and come alive? Like, what's the thing that when you do it, like you are filled with joy and like that it's like really driving you? And, I can say that like when I was a younger version of myself, like I didn't do meditation. I didn't know what self-care was. I just followed that gut feeling that I had when I led my first high school walkout, and like feeling like I wanted to feel like that most of the time, and that it made me feel seen. It made me feel purposeful. And so whatever, like it can be like digital design, it could be music, it could be, I don't know, nails. And like last time UWD had like this spotlight of an undocumented brilliant artist, a makeup artist, that she walked us through like how doing her makeup is part of like her own practice of like being able to like affirm her own beauty in that way. And so it just feels like, what is the thing that is lighting you up like that, that like is able to propel you into the next thing? And being open. I think for the longest time, I thought that my life was supposed to be like this chronological order. Like grade high school, and then I will go to college, and then I'll get married, and I'll have kids. Some of us live that life, and there's nothing wrong with that. I didn't. Like, I dropped out of college my junior year because my dad was deported and I couldn't afford it anymore. I'm not married or have kids. Like, and like life sort of zigzagged. Like, I was selling used cars at one moment because that was the only job I could get without having papers. And so for me, is most of being open to the opportunities that come out and not hurting yourself when the things that you thought could happen don't pan out, because that's actually life happening to you. And being able to seize those moments, I think, is has been the thing that I remind myself of, and like the places where I felt like the most alive.
Yeah. And also figuring out, like you said, what is the learning that I can do here, right? Whatever it is, whatever situation you're in, what am I learning from this, instead of like resisting it or pushing it away? Because there is oftentimes a part of it that we can learn about ourselves. And then you get clearer. Every experience makes you more and more clear about what are my values, what is important to me. And then, as you said, what sparks joy. And usually it's, sort of what it is that you're good at doing, what you feel connected to when you're working with other people. All of that can spark some joy, and then get you closer to your role. All right, I think we're going to take one more question, because I could like talk to you, as you know, for hours. It's but I want to get to this question, and then I'll answer this one from Emma Madeline at the end, because it's about the math. But here is a question around performative activism from Amay Rubel. What are your thoughts on performative activism, which oftentimes happens on social media? And then someone else had asked something similar, which is, is it easier to advocate sort of online or, obviously in person? And as we're going digital more, especially with COVID and social distancing, I'm curious to know, Greisa, how would you sort of advise folks, right, who want to get engaged and be engaged in an authentic way? What does it take to sort of move beyond like transactional or performative allyship and to actually build some of those authentic connections?
I guess, if I may, I think I kind of reject the premise of the question a little bit, because it feels like there's like some judgment around someone else's expression of or activism. Sometimes whenever I was undocumented and really ashamed, the only thing that I could do was like be online and on Facebook that felt right to me and safe to me and share things. And that felt really scary at the moment. So I guess I would dissuade us from being able to put a judgment on how people show up. I'll also say that like I recognize that there's a lot of attention put on social media, on like your Instagram, like capturing the perfect moment and your perfect bite right before you eat your food. And I actually experienced, and also being able to like have the sharpest wit and have the best tweet that gets all the thousands of likes on it. And to be honest, like I succumb to that sometimes. And recently, as we heard about the story of the Black woman nurse that was a whistleblower of telling the stories of the hysterectomies that were happening in the detention centers, that's not new. Like, we know that Black women have been sterilized against their will for centuries in this country, and it's part of a fascist state. But I kind of felt like it was, as a woman, as someone who has been detained by ICE and by CBP, I didn't want to mourn that publicly. Like, I felt like I needed to keep that. Like, obviously, like, or United We Dream talked about it, like but as a person, I just kind of felt like there was a lot of pressure for me to say something online, and I've just been sitting with like I haven't even been able to process what that means. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, that's okay for me. Like, that doesn't say anything more or less about me as an immigrant woman or as a leader. I hope that people don't grade me on like whether I was able to respond with the sharpest thing on Twitter or Instagram. I don't grade myself like that. And if you do, then there's some introspection that needs to be had. But it's okay for things to not be all of it in display, and it's okay for you to decide to move on, to choose on how you move. Now, if you are in a place of power, if you have been organizing in moments, and you still make it about yourself, and you use your social media platform to advance your own agenda, that's where I call it. Like, if you're not doing real organizing work and are accountable to a base of people, then, I would have some questions for you. But all of it is like moving with compassion and grace, because we just don't know what people are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize, like you said, that people are engaging in, we're trying to kind of move away from the word allyship and talk about being a co-conspirator and sort of taking a risk and having a stake, right? Instead of sort of just being an ally. And oftentimes, it is about figuring out what it is that you have at your fingertips, right? I think about, for example, a lot of the ways in which people around the world are showing up for rallies, like whether it's the Arab Spring, for even, right? A lot of that was actually through the social media. That's how it happened. That's how it spread. So it's really important to understand sort of the ways in which we can use digital technology, and at the same time, and as Ame says here, that sometimes misinformation spreads, right? And that people are saying things that aren't true, or they're sort of doing it to get their, one of our students in a previous Solidarity School mentioned, like, it's woke credits, like trying to like build your woke credits up by speaking about something all the time. But I think what your point is so clear, which is that it's really important to recognize how can you be more really strategic in terms of how you're going to respond or how you're going to take action. And whether it's digital technology, whether it is for some people going to a rally, whether it's for others to write something that's heartfelt, it depends on the strategy you want to use. But again, trying to be really clear about what's strategic, what's going to be in service to the issue, and to the communities, again, that we want to center the most. And thank you for also mentioning what's happening right now this week in particular with the women in Georgia at the detention center. And I want to again lift up groups like Detention Watch Network and Georgia Detention Watch and Project South, that are really on the front lines of this issue right now. And hopefully folks who are interested in learning more will visit their social media and their websites, because there are action alerts and there are ways that you can take action. Okay, I think we have like gone way longer than I meant to keep you. And so what I want to end with is actually really invite people to do three things. One is, please join us at the Solidarity Semester, because we didn't get to a lot of the questions, right? But we are answering those questions at the Solidarity Semester. So you can still register. Our pinned tweet, I'm on Twitter way more than Instagram. Our pinned comment tells you how you can register, where you can register. So please do that and join us on Tuesdays, Zoom, and then Thursdays. And I want to let you know that we have a lot of folks who were thankful will be joining us. So Greisa joined us today, but we have these amazing folks who are joining us throughout the course of the next month. Greisa and I know these folks and care about them deeply. Our friends, our fam. So Janine Comino, who is with the National Urban Indian Family Coalition, Judith Brown-Dianis with the Advancement Project, Ahmed Abuznaid, who works on Palestinian liberation, and Alex Tom, who works with Asian American communities, but also with young folks who are leading movements for change. So we're so excited to have them all. And you all are going to get to hear their advice, their own vulnerability that they'll share, just like Greisa said. So please join us for those. And last but not least, please visit unitedwedream.org. Donate, support, lift up their leadership, retweet them, share their posts, and get involved using the social change role that you feel most connected to, because we need everybody to really make sure that we're fighting for justice for immigrants and refugees and communities of color all around this country. So really hope that folks will get involved in that fight. So with that, thank you so much, Greisa. I love you.
Bye. Good night,
Appreciate
everyone.
you.
You
Bye,
too.
everyone.
Thank you, Deepa.